Hi, everybody. Hope you're doing marvellously well. I'm very excited because we're talking to Josh Rogosin. I'm sure everybody in this world knows what Tiny Desk is. Tiny Desk is, I don't know, revolutionary is probably a big word, but it might well be well suited to this show. And it's interesting because I just got on with Josh 2 seconds ago and he was playing Post Malone. Now, so much modern music, Josh, is maligned and artists are considered to be manufactured, auto-tuned, gridded, whatever. And that was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful show that you did because you really brought an artist to the fold and let people see that there was true talent there. And that's really, I think, what your show has done probably more than any other thing. And welcome, by the way.
Thank you, Warren. It's so fun to be here after many years of watching you. Yes, when I was at NPR doing Tiny Desk, bringing folks in like Post Malone, I remember he came up to me and said, "All right, man, my voice is balls today. We're on tour." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry. I'm not going to be able to put any auto-tune on your voice. It's just not what we do." He's like, "I know what you do, man. I'm cool. Can you grab me another beer?" And, it's just one of those just like super laid back, chill, in it to win it, awesome attitude, made everyone feel so wonderful.
How long did you do Tiny Desk for?
I took over in 2014.
Oh, wow. So 10 years.
Yeah, indeed. So my predecessor, Kevin Waite, he came up with the whole stereo shotgun thing. Us on the radio side of things, I grew up doing documentary sound for radio production with like National Geographic. I went to West Africa, did stories about voodoo rituals and festivals, recording drum circles and all kinds of rituals. I was in Cambodia doing sound gathering about the giant freshwater catfish that lived in the Mekong River.
Like you do.
And like you do. And it became pretty evident that NPR was going to steer away from the high-end audio recording in the field once technology changed, once 9/11 happened, and the news was much more important than these human interest stories that we were doing. I left for a while, and then my colleague and pal and predecessor, Kevin Waite, who came up with the whole stereo shotgun thing, said, "Hey, I'm ready to pass the baton. I think it'd be perfect. You should apply for it." And I'd worked with Bob Boylan, whose desk it was, because Bob retired recently as well from the show. We worked together doing the news radio, All Things Considered, and Bob was the director who would choose all the music bumpers between all the radio stories. And people would bombard Bob, "Hey, what song did you use? What was that music?" And that's when he started All Songs Considered. Long before podcasting, he created All Songs Considered, a show for your computer. And this was in, 2003. So he was a trailblazer for sure. And then, when he headed to South by Southwest, as we did every year, to feature the festival and discover new musicians, him, as the story goes, he and Stephen Thompson were at a club listening to Laura Gibson play. They couldn't hear her over the crowd because there was a game on TV. It was March Madness. They went up to her after the show and as a joke said, "We think your music sounded beautiful. We couldn't quite hear it." And then Steven, as a joke, said, "Well, next time you're in DC, why don't you come to Bob's desk and play a show?" She's like, "All right, I'm going to do it." She called their bluff. She shows up. Bob pulls out his, hi-8 video tape machine and set up literally one microphone. And 2008 was the beginning of something that they didn't really realize would turn into anything besides, a couple of blog posts.
It is a way to see some of your favorite artists in the raw, obviously, but it's also probably, for me, more important, a way to discover new talent. What was the process like? Who was doing the choosing of said talent? Were people, I presume, obviously you got to a point where people were pitching you, hundreds of times a day, but in that initial kind of growing phase, what was the sort of process?
It was really wonderful. I mean, the show didn't really take off until I started. Coincidence? I don't know, Warren. You tell me. But, it was kind of a sleeper hit for a very long time. And then once people like Anderson .Paak came along, and then Mac Miller recorded his massive, successful Tiny Desk before he passed a month later. And then my influence as a producer was to bring what I grew up with, which is musical theater. And I booked Little Shop of Horrors during the pandemic, and I booked Hadestown, and I booked Sweeney Todd, and I had Stephen Schwartz play his musical Wicked with just the two witches. Now that's going to be in a huge movie. And I brought Blue Man Group because I grew up seeing Blue Man Group, and I just freaked out as a kid. And I remember pitching Bob. I'm like, I want to start doing some weird shit at the desk. Like, I want to break it a little bit. How would you feel about bringing Blue Man Group? He's like, are they going to bring paint? I said, I don't think so. We can think creatively outside that box. And he had never seen the show, but he used to play the Blue Man Group audio CD, which I think came out in 2001, as bumper music, because it was all instrumental and lots of percussion. It sounded very cool. And he said, well, I loved that album. I guess I'm open to it. And that sort of opened the door. Now, the way that the show is booked is that someone on the music team needs to fall in love with an artist, have seen them live, and basically would just pitch Bob. But now, things have changed a lot since those early days. I'm much more of the mind of like music discovery, introducing folks to, a new group or a group in a different way, especially like theater. It's not quite as widespread as like, I don't know, who just did it? Justin Timberlake, which was after I left. I don't know. As much as I love working with and hanging out with very, very famous, talented musicians, my heart was sort of ready to take it down a notch and to pursue my own goals of discovering music all over the world and sharing it in that intimate way that I sort of created.
So what's your new venture?
I have a new show called Global Sound Concerts. I've been traveling first to Valencia, Spain. I did a workshop at Berklee School of Music, College of Music in Valencia. And I'd asked some of the students, do you know any local musicians? So the whole conceit of the show is to find musicians where they are from, to learn more about that place, to learn about why that place influences them to make music. And I'd love to share with you some pilot stuff if you're curious.
I would love to,
share
yes.
You, like the intro to something.
Ya no canto las coplas, ni duermo de tu lado. Ya no digo te amo, aunque te busquen más personas. Te intenté reemplazar con amores fugaces, evitando los lugares que de los dos fueron propiedad. Me prometí no pensarte, decirte adiós, no hasta luego.
What are those mics? What are they?
Yeah. One of my favorite things about being an audio engineer is just playing with gear, right? I mean, it's just such a nerdy thing. So I first came in contact with this mic. I was producing a show called Ask Me Another. It was a trivia show at the Bell House in Brooklyn, New York. And this wonderful group came, who I didn't know at the time, called the Milk Carton Kids. I don't know if you're familiar with them. Beautiful duo. Both play guitar, both sing. Very similar to this, but they brought one mic by this company in Portland, Oregon called Ear Trumpet Labs. And it just looks like this crazy steampunk
I've seen their mics, but I've just never seen that particular one that you're using. The way that swivel, I was admiring it, thinking, oh, what was that?
Yeah, I really appreciate that you can focus the capsule. So I like having mics out of the shot. That's my deal. I'm not doing so great today, but I like having the ability to see the performers. How often do you get to hear a beautiful recording or be at a live concert without a mic right here? And there's something that happens when the technology disappears a little bit. So the beauty of these ear trumpet labs in particular is that you can focus that large diaphragm. They're about $600, and
Is that all they are?
yeah.
That quality was superb.
Thank you.
Was that was one mic per performer only?
That's right, but I also had a DI on each of their guitars.
Ah, you had a DI on the guitar. I was trying to figure it out. I was like, there's got to be a DI. So, okay.
Yes, and I also had mics in the room, so to capture the natural reverb. I really didn't add any reverb. It was just the room is stunning.
So that was like, they're obviously in like a water park.
It's called Parque de Coatzacoalcos. It's in Mexico City. So I was in Mexico City. I was invited to Soundcheck Expo, which you might be familiar with. And it's sort of like the NAMM of Latin America. While I was there, I said, well, I'm working on this new project. I'm going to ask folks, on my social media pages and things like this. Someone reached out to me. Hey, I'm in Baja. I see you're visiting Baja. Come on down. My friend Rodrigo at El Ganzo is a hotel. He runs a recording studio in the basement. Hung out with him. I said, hey, I'm going to Mexico City. Do you know of any musicians? He said, let me reach out to my people. I'm from Mexico City. And his whole network of folks that he thought to do it were busy, but they all suggested this guy, Andre. Watched a couple of his videos. I said, oh my God, this is just so beautiful. I just love it. And he's from Mexico City. That was the whole conceit of the show. Find people from where they are and then find a really gorgeous, unique location that might not everybody have seen before. Like if you've been to Mexico City, maybe the most obvious place to be would be in the big square, beneath the Mexican flag. But I wanted to pick something more unique. So I also crowdsourced. I actually met someone in Baja as well. And he said, yeah, I'm from Mexico City. I said, well, I described what I wanted. What's a super unique but iconic location in Mexico City that'll just make your jaw drop? He gave me a list of about 5 places. This was the first one on the list, and I stopped looking. I didn't know how to get permission. It's actually closed to the public, this Parque de Coatzacoalcos. I think you can get an Airbnb for $1,000 a night, something crazy, and they're booked for months.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a massive campus. This is just one small room in this massive, it looks like Teletubby land. I can't even describe it. Rolling hills and serpents everywhere, and the most stunning location. So I asked him, where should we go? He said this place. And then I didn't have permission to get a recording there. And I spoke with Andre over the phone. I said, I really want to do it at Parque Coatzacoalcos. And he's like, well, what about this place? What about this place? And then he said, actually, I have a friend who's a photographer for that park. And lo and behold, she got us permission to go and record there. And this was all just a lesson for me about just if you just go out into the world with an idea and talk to people, incredible convergence of opportunity can present themselves. And that was all culminated in this video. I was at Tec de Monterrey giving a lecture about field audio recording, and it started an hour late, and I had this scheduled for an hour later, and I had to basically get whisked away in an Uber to get myself to the recording on time. We show up, it's pouring rain. I mean, this is what happens, right? It's Murphy's Law. Where are we going to do it? Where are we going to do it? My whole idea was to do it outside with this massive, crazy sculpture in the background, which is actually the Airbnb. It's this massive snake that has like rooms in it. It's the most unique place I think I've even ever been to. So we show up, and then we just had to scout, and we just walked and walked and walked in this massive park. And then I'd seen this on screen before at Parque Coatzacoalcos, and I said, oh, okay, let's see what that is. Walked in, and it was just the most stunning. I was worried about the reverb time in there. So of course, the second I was
going to ask about that.
I'm clapping, I'm screaming, hey, 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 like listening to the decay, because I like having the mic further away, but unfortunately, that introduces a lot of bleed. I think a lot of my work in post-production is muting all of the mics that aren't being used in that moment to create some more intimacy.
It was really interesting. So you're coming down the shot through this, I suppose, tunnel. I couldn't help but notice the patterns. They're beautiful with all these sort of, circular, smooth, round pebbles. I wonder what kind of reverberation that creates. Did you have mics in there that you were blending in for reverb, or how did you do it?
Yeah, it's so interesting. So I was using actually this little DJI, the folks who make the drones. They make this little Pocket 3, it's called. It's this tiny little camera on a gimbal that looks way better than an iPhone. I believe in using dedicated gear. I actually don't believe recording to the computer. I realize I'm probably being recorded to a computer right now. I'm recording to an external sound device's Mix Pre 6 because
actually Eric has a wax cylinder in the back.
Thank God. I like gear to do what gear does. So this little camera has actually 3 microphones in it as well. I did end up blending in the sound of that hallway from the built-in mics. I also had a pair of ambient mics in the space as well as 2 DIs and the 2 Ear Trumpet Lab mics. So it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 channels of audio plus the camera when I wanted to kind of like fly it. I also used it on the outside when I had them start. I had the camera start outside, and it happened to be raining. So I actually used the ambient audio on the onboard mics of the little camera, and it shoots at 4K. I'm learning about video too, because as one must, and I love that. I love approaching music as a journalist. And that's what I loved about being the audio producer for Tiny Desk for 10 years, was capturing music as a reporter, as a journalist, rather than as a perfectionist, as an audio technician, meticulously getting every moment perfect. I love the nuance. I love the warts. Give me the warts.
I think there's going to be more love for this, and this is going to grow in a massive way because, like everything, as we start get dominated by this kind of perfection in music, people are going to look to you and others and go, oh, you're capturing something that has soul, has life.
Humanity, yeah. And that's what I did as a journalist all those years, telling people stories around the world using different sound gathering techniques that an audio documentarian would use, like MS Stereo, which is where the MS Stereo mic came from for the shotgun, or, using the Neumann KU100 binaural head. I have a photo of me in the field. I actually fashioned like a metal hanger that I twisted around my headphones and put 2 DPA 4060 omnidirectional microphones as a binaural kit so that I could still have my boom pole with my MS Stereo rig inside of it, the MKH 5030 pair. And I was actually, at the time, because it was 2004, I was recording to 2 DAT machines that I would sync together in post. I also have a very early ambisonic recording. I'm giving a presentation on July 11th about all this field sound recording and how it influenced the way I record music. And that's at radiobootcamp.org, and it's July 11th from noon to 3. And part of the presentation is going to be going through these field recordings that really influenced how I record music. One of the beautiful things about telling stories out in the world that has, rich sound experiences is that if you close your eyes in your mind's eye, it really manages to create a picture. I can just play you back some audio of, being in West Africa, and you can kind of get an idea about what it's like there. That's just like an MS Stereo recording, and if you hear the beginning of the actual radio story.
In Africa, the word voodoo is used to mean simply a spirit. The elements and forces of the earth, along with dead ancestors, are considered to be divine beings. In order for mortals to achieve success and assure protection, they must worship and appease these deities. There is Egu, god of iron, Mamiwata, goddess of water, Sakpata, spirit of the earth, and Hevioso, the thunder god.
I think that taught me a lot about recording music too. I remember making a recording of my own music. There was a bird screaming its head off. I was living on Venice Beach, and it was right on my balcony, and it was just like so loud. And finally, I was tracking my vocal, and finally I said, well, screw it. I'm not going to fight it anymore. And I put a mic out there, and the bird was a part of the song. And I think there's something about, capturing a moment in time rather than trying to encapsulate perfection that speaks a lot to the humanity that makes music so powerful.
The noise floor is like non-existent. What are you recording on? What's your medium you're recording to?
I'm a big fan of field recorders, so dedicated audio equipment. I can certainly use them as audio interfaces at the same time these days. Like for Global Sound concerts so far, I've been using the Mix Pre 6, but I also have the 888 from Sound Devices as well. And what that allows me to do is have, 8 internal mic preamps, but then with a little attachment, I can add, 8 more AES inputs. And also simultaneously, I can use an Ethernet cable to connect it to my laptop to record a session in Reaper as a backup, a full multi-track. But I do trust the Sound Devices because, if you think about a professional photographer, they're not recording directly to their computer. They've got a camera with 2 cards that are writing simultaneously. I'm all about backups. I've been burned before. If you've been in this business long enough, something happens and you lost the tape, and that is like, you kind of have to have that experience to learn the lesson. So I'm a huge fan of Sound Devices' ability to have an internal SSD and 2 SD cards. So I can print, let's say, a full multi-track and my 2 mix as a poly file in the internal SSD, individual mono stems into one of the SD cards, and then maybe an MP3 2 mix for the producer in the 3rd SD card slot. And I love that redundancy. Oh, and by the way, all the while using an Ethernet jack over Dante to feed a full computer Pro Tools rig or whatever you have. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that. I get very nervous when it's like, oh, that's the only recording that's being made. Ooh, okay.
I hear you. I've been stung many, many times, as I'm sure many people watching and listening have as well. I'm super impressed with the quality of the recording, the fact that we could hear him singing and speaking at such a relatively low level, probably quieter than I'm talking now.
Yes.
And yet beautiful stereo imagery where I could hear things moving around. I forget that kind of quality is achievable. I suppose also the advantage of being outside where you don't have it must be lovely as well, where you're not dealing
reflections.
with reflections. And even in this room, I'm speaking into a small diaphragm condenser above me, but there's a computer down there. There's there's things humming along. You don't even think about it, do we? And the beauty of listening to your recordings is you just get the great outdoors. When you're mixing, is there any go-to tools for you that you always find are useful?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, certainly, RX, of course, is the industry standard for just noise removal. If there's too much background noise and you need to isolate a voice, I have used that in the past. And I'm not using anything fancy. Otherwise, it's just like, the Waves Platinum bundle, where I'll use the L2 limiter and, the Renaissance reverb and Renaissance EQ and then maybe master everything in Ozone and just kind of futz around with the presets and tweak from there. It's to me, it's not rocket science, but I think, using your ears and manipulating the audience by really making things pop out where you want them to is something that I learned through documentary filmmaking, and it's what I bring to my audio mixing as well. If there's a little bass lick, even if it's in the middle of a verse, I'll let it pop out of the mix. And not even let it, I'll force it to pop out of the mix. Like, wow, that musician just did something very cool. I'm going to actually use it and distract people with it in a way because it makes the music breathe. So I think as audio engineers, we have a tremendous ability to make a mix sound more dynamic than just, all right, let's just set a good level for this track or squash the heck out of it and let it live in one place. I'm much more interested in really listening to what's going on all the tracks and bringing things in based on my sensibilities as a musician, which is going to be different than Warren's sensibilities as a musician. I'd love to do that more. Like, let me give you the raw tracks to this session, and I'll take the raw tracks, and let's hear the differences.
There must be a beauty of working, when you're traveling the world, and working with artists that probably have very little experience of recording, more experience of performing. That must be actually quite refreshing, because if I'm recording a band live that really don't play live that often, the problem is they're just used to going hell for leather. Their volume's the volume that they play at. They're not.
That's right.
They're not worrying about how they're interacting with the vocal, which is, either recorded and listened to on headphones or going through a massive PA. But there you are in situations where it has to work. The vocal has to cut across the percussion.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I have to be very pushy, but in a way that they can trust me, in a way that I'm speaking to them as a musician, so that what I'm saying makes perfect sense. Okay. When I was working with Nile Rodgers, when he came to Tiny Desk, I just spoke to him and his band and said, look, it has to be a bit more dynamic than you're used to on stage, because our little audience here, I have a tiny little PA with a couple of Genelec speakers pointed in different directions, but basically when the verse comes and she's singing by herself, everything can be full on because everyone's singing full out, but then once the verse starts, you gotta just tuck it under right at that moment. And they just took that direction so beautifully. And that's something that not all musicians are interested or willing to even just listen in that way. Is what makes Tiny Desk so special and beautiful, is that there's no choice. Otherwise, the people who are standing around aren't gonna hear the music. So, that's me with my ambisonic rig. I've got 4.
When was that?
That was
You're a baby.
West Africa in 2004. In that bag, I've got 2 D8 DAT recorders with 2 Sonosax preamps in front of it. Before ambisonic came about, I'm recording quad. These are omnidirectional MKH20 mics on this rig that I fashioned with my friend Flan Williams, one of my mentors at NPR. And we put this together with tent poles and a 2x4 wood block. And I can sync this stuff together. And believe it or not, in 2004, Pro Tools Free had a DTS plugin. And I was actually able to decode this stuff to a DTS video CD that I could put in, that I still, to this day, can put into any DVD player that can decode DTS to a home theater. And I'll hear my ambisonic sound. My folks... my mom was an original Musketeer. My dad conducted for Johnny Mathis.
Oh, wow.
And I grew up performing, yeah.
I didn't know you had so much of a pedigree in music. That's incredible.
Yeah, that's where it comes from, right? That's why I have these slides here.
Go back to you with long hair. What was all that about? Let's have a look at that.
This was me at summer camp wanting to write love songs, and this is where my love for audio recording began, with, of course, the cassette-based Tascam 424. I had an external MIDI verb unit I could send reverb to on the aux sends. This is a handy little thing. It's somewhere in a box. And now I think on the Teenage Engineering OP1, they've got like a 4-track emulator, cassette 4-track emulator, to make it sound as crappy as it did in 1994. Yeah,
I suppose that's the consistent conversation that we all have, isn't it? How we're all going back to when things were worse, thinking that they were better. What was the little slideshow you had there with some talking about how you record? I'd love to know more of that, because we're going to have a lot of geeks here like myself.
Yes.
They're going to want to know a little bit more about how you do this.
So this is the presentation. Please, anyone out there, if you're interested, I'm going to be giving on July 11th an online course from noon to 3, an in-depth breakdown about my career in broadcast engineering and why I'm one of the most celebrated live recordists. So I talk a lot about, the different stereo sound recording techniques. This is the mid-side in a Zeppelin, the MKH50 and a 30. What's beautiful about mid-side is, of course, the stereo to mono compatibility and the ability to create as narrow or as wide a stereo image as you wish in post-production. And then here I am with my dual rig. This is my binaural metal hanger setup with my two 4060 DPA Omni mics. And then of course in the boom pole is the 3040 or the 5030. The ambisonic on the Mekong River, ORTF, sure. And then I go in to talk about polar patterns. Here's a bunch of dynamic mics I love and how much they cost. You can get them all cheaper on eBay. Talk about shotgun condensers and electric condensers.
Those Audio-Technicas are surprisingly good for the price, aren't they? They're pretty amazing.
Absolutely. You know, all the NPR reporters go out with these things because, you know, what's beautiful about a shotgun mic is that you don't have to get right up in the grill of the person you're interviewing, which is nice. And also, you know, if you're in a loud environment like a stadium or a protest, you can actually get some directionality. And these things are designed to pick up human speech. They really cut through. And I'd take a Pepsi challenge with an MKH 416, you know, at a proper distance on axis. And there's a clarity there that can't be matched. I talk about small diaphragm condensers that I love and use. Large diaphragm, there's the old Ear Trumpet Labs Delphina on the left, and some other heavy hitters.
I've got to find out more about that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you like the SR 314. We really love that too.
Oh, yeah. It's such a cool mic.
It's a great mic.
Yeah, I love the Earthworks stuff and the D20s that you can clip onto the drum. DM20 that you clip onto the drums. Of course, the 4099s. I'm really into the new Neumann MCM 114s for clip-ons. They have all the different clips. And then, of course, the cheapo AKG's been good to me over the years. And, of course, you've got this crazy ambisonic stuff. Soyuz just came out with one that I'm very curious about.
I have a question on the KU100. Do you find you're doing a lot of EQ though? We found using the KU100 that it was very middly. It didn't have the brightness that we would have anticipated. Do you find you're compensating for it?
I would roll off some of the low end to take care of the air conditioning noise. I mostly used it for just ambience in the room for Tiny Desk specifically. I had it suspended above the Tiny Desk about 9 feet in the air as this disembodied head that I got a big laugh out of every time I saw it. And I would basically use it for audience reaction and applause. And for that, it worked beautifully because it was a very enveloping, honest representation of what it felt like to be there. So, if you listen to the Mac Miller Tiny Desk, I had it up during that time. And you listen to the audience versus some other recordings. Because Neumann only lent it to me for a couple of months and I had to send it back, sadly. I talk about USB audio, of course, up your game for your Zoom calls.
Where's this hosted? Where's this going to be hosted?
So it's radiobootcamp.org. And I've been working on this presentation for weeks. And just all the different stuff I've learned over my career, like foldable stands that get really small to fit in a suitcase, using clamps instead of mic stands to, you can mic a drummer really nicely with, a couple of mics clamped to their, cymbal stand and their hi-hat stand and their ride stand. And you can kind of get the whole kit, and also just being able to buy inexpensive stuff. Cause I recently had some gear confiscated at an airport. They said I can't have any stands because they extend. I was like, what? So,
really?
I had this $20 stand that's made for an iPhone, and then you just buy the 1/4 inch to 5/8 inch adapters to go from the little camera connector to a mic connector, and you've got a pretty useful $20 mic stand. So this is all the stuff that I've learned over the years. You got to use protection. You heard it here first. Different cables that I've grown enamored with. The ability to use a 4-channel Ethernet snake to send, 50 audio line level over 50 feet. So if you've got a mic preamp on the other end and you're sending line level, it's amazing that you can just send analog audio over Ethernet cable for hundreds and hundreds of feet, which is how I would accomplish recording a lot of music festivals when there's 3 stages. I would run hundreds and hundreds of feet of Ethernet cable just to get a front of house 2 mix and my audience mics. And I would just use a 4-channel Ethernet snake to do it.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Is this, and those are the recorders you use,
Right. So, over the years, things have developed as such that a lot of these recorders kind of put audio engineers out of a job because now everything became so small, was no longer, cumbersome. I guess at the time, a little bit before my time, we were doing Nagras, which is reel-to-reel analog tape to record this field sound gathering stuff.
Nagra, then DAT, then hard disk. Yeah.
Nagra, then DAT, and then once it went to these tiny little things that sounded good enough, audio engineers, unfortunately, we went from like 60 engineers at NPR to 20 when this stuff came out. Yep. And a lot of these can be used as audio interfaces too. I talk about inputs and DIs. I talk about closed back headphones, in-ears. I talk about open back headphones, the ultimate reference monitors, or your earpods, of course, and, your smartphone.
Josh, thank you ever so much. I really, really appreciate it. And thanks for taking us on a little bit of a nerdy journey. Recording, documentary stuff, film and TV, all of these kinds of things. It's quite a different world to your average audio engineering. I'll be the first to admit that. People often, rightly so, criticize some of our audio when we're out and about running around because, we're in situations we don't know what's going to happen, and we've got clip-on mics, and we don't always have shotguns and all this stuff. And I realize it's a whole skill set.
Yes.
You've taken that art to a whole new level. So thank you for sharing with us on it. I really, really appreciate all your knowledge.
Oh, it was super fun to geek out with you, Warren. Thank you.
Well, we should do more. Scraping the surface here.
Please, I'll be back. See you soon.
And we'll put a link down to everything we've been talking about in here for everybody to go and check out.
Brilliant. Stay tuned. See you online.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Josh. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, adios. Goodbye.
Hasta luego.